Testing. Hi, my name is Erica Ogden. I am presenting for this oral theory presentation on cognitive therapy with Vincent van Gogh. Cognitive therapy, more strictly Albert Ellis's rational emotive behavior therapy, focuses, and its main premise is that psychological stress is a function of the cognitive process disturbances. What does that mean? Well, let's look at what cognition is. Cognition is simply mental processes. It's how we think, it's how we acquire knowledge, and it's what we do while we're thinking. It's all of the cognitions that come together while we're thinking. In REBT, or Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, the main premise is that if you change your mind and you change your thought life, then you can change your actual life. REBT puts a lot of weight into the client and their ability to change. So, how do we change our thought life? First, we have to look at our beliefs. We have to look at those beliefs that are rigid, that we go by every day, and we have to get rid of irrational beliefs. An example of a rigid or irrational belief is this. If you have a thought and you're thinking, if I don't succeed at school or I don't succeed at my career, I'm a failure and people will think less of me. That's an irrational belief, and that belief will lead you to reactions that are not congruent with how you want to live. So how do we restructure this belief through cognitive therapy? We're going to look at the ABC model that cognitive therapists use. The ABC model is a model that you can take a thought and you can run it through and you can possibly see where the faultiness lies. The A in the ABC model is your experience. So when we say that if we don't succeed at school or we don't succeed at our career, we're going to be failures and people will think less of us, the failure part of that is our experience. We feel the failure. We feel like a failure. So let's move on to B, which is our beliefs. Our beliefs about failure, maybe that it's shameful, is what causes C, which is our reaction. Our reaction to believing that we should be shameful could be sadness, it could be depression, it could be that we devaluate ourselves. So we have the experience, we fail. We fail at school, we fail at our careers. We believe that this failure is going to make us people are going to think less of us. We're not going to be good enough. Okay? And then C, our reaction is sadness and devaluation of ourselves. So in cognitive therapy, we would look at this belief system and we would say, okay, what do we need to do to change this belief system, which is C. Out of A, B, and C, we must change our belief. We must change how we look at the experience. How do we do this? Well, the ways we do this is through detecting, debating, and discriminating. Let's take our belief that failure is shameful. In the detecting portion of it, which is the shoulds, the musts, the self-downing voices that we hear. You know, I should have the laundry folded nicely. I should have the kids nice and clean. I should do this. I should do that. We have to point those out. We have to look at those and detect where those are in our lives. So in doing so, we would say, hey, I feel like if I fail, I'm going to need to be shameful. That's detecting. You've pinpointed where the thought process, where the irrational thought is. Then you debate that thought. You question your belief and you argue to and against it. Let's say, okay, I need to feel shameful because I failed. Well, that's one way to think about it. That's one belief. However, I could choose to look at it another way. Failure, sorry about that, guys. Failure is a part of life. So if I look at failure as a stepping stone to success, then the setbacks that I suffer at school, the setbacks that I suffer in my career, won't look as if it is the end. It will look as if it is a means to an end. So the failure then becomes, in your mind, a stepping stone, and we move on. And with that, we learn and we grow instead of letting the reaction of sadness come in, or depression come in, or whatever emotion, whatever reaction you're going to have. We don't devalue ourselves. We say, hey, I'm not going to look at this in an irrational way. I'm going to rationalize this and say that it is a means to an end. Doing all this, the detecting, the debating, the discriminating with your irrational thoughts is called cognitive restructuring. It's pretty much just basically in your thought life, in your cognitions, out with the old, in with the new. And this is what cognitive therapists strive to help their clients do. So in that recap of cognitive therapy and focusing on the ABC model, I want to look at the life of Vincent van Gogh. Vincent van Gogh was born in 1853 in Holland. He had 5 siblings. Of these 5 siblings, he was the oldest. His parents were Theo and Anna van Gogh. Theo was a Protestant minister, and Anna was at home with the children. One very prominent thing that happened in Van Gogh's life very early on was that he was born into a family who had already suffered loss. Vincent van Gogh's older brother, born a year before him, had died, and so his parents were grief-stricken. They were upset, and they were sad, and they were mad about that happening, so much so that they named Vincent after his older dead brother. So that carried a lot of weight for Vincent. What happened was that through this event and the structure of their family, Vincent van Gogh was made to feel like he didn't add up. His mother was not warm. The family connections were not there. Vincent often felt like he had little self-worth. He suffered extreme guilt for living and for his older brother having been dead, and his parents wanting him so badly to be with them still. So that was kind of what was going on in their lives. And the rational emotive behavioral therapy says that a lot of times your irrational beliefs can be formed in your younger life. So with the hurt and with the pain and with the inability to connect to Vincent the way parents should, perhaps Vincent formed these irrational beliefs about himself, and then without going through the ABC model or doing any cognitive reconstructing, he carried these beliefs with him, and they were ingrained. And so from then on, he operated off of these beliefs. Vincent was described by his sister as an odd child. He was intensely serious and uncommunicative. He himself described his childhood as gloomy, cold, and sterile. So just from his own words, you get a sense that Vincent was not given the proper upbringing in order to form these competencies to create these rational beliefs. Vincent's life had 2 main themes, and the 2 main themes that he carried with him throughout his life were rejection and failure, unfortunately. He dealt with rejection and failure on a daily basis throughout his life. Vincent was a man who was also heavily religious. He did follow in his father's footsteps in that, and he wanted to be a preacher. So his entire life, he wished to give himself to others, but in this, he was rejected. So you could imagine how that would feel. He had been rejected by his parents. He had been rejected by the ministry that he tried so hard to get into so that he could help other people. He was rejected by women. He fell in love easily, but he was rejected every time. He never had a successful love life. He was rejected by his coworkers in that he was fired many times because he was so intent, because he just had so much passion that oftentimes it would not resonate well with his coworkers and he would get fired. He was even rejected by an entire community at one point in which he lived. The community, the townspeople got together and they voted to send Vincent van Gogh off to a place that would treat his mental illness. So I mean that's some pretty hard rejection and failure right there to face. One thing Vincent did do in 1880 is he started painting. So through this, he found a little bit of release from this rejection and failure. Okay, so we know that Vincent had a history of rejection, that he had a history of failure, and that he was institutionalized many times. On July 29th, 1890, he died, and how this happened was he was in a cornfield and died of a gunshot wound. Now, whether it was a suicide or an accident, we don't know. There's speculations, but nobody really knows. So what I'd like to do now is kind of marry the story of Vincent van Gogh with the basis of cognitive therapy, specifically the rational emotive behavior therapy from Albert Ellis and the ABC theory, with the themes of rejection and failure in mind. The premise of REBT is that it is largely our own repetition of early indoctrined, irrational beliefs that keep dysfunctional attitudes alive and thriving. So like we talked about before, he did not have a very good basis from which to form rational beliefs about himself. So Vincent's irrational beliefs could have been and probably were that I am not worthy, I am a failure, I cannot win approval no matter how hard I try, I am not good. That was probably constantly streaming in his mind and in his head because of the things that he had been through. If we take one of these thoughts, if we take the thought, I cannot win approval, into the ABC model, and we try the cognitive reconstructing, this is possibly what it could have looked like for Vincent. The experience was failure and rejection. His belief, which is B in the ABC model, is that he's not worthy of love. He's not good. He's of no value. And this was possibly because his mom was not there for him because she was suffering herself from depression. His reaction, he had many reactions to these things. He was angry. He had physical symptoms. He was very intense in his emotions and his feelings. He was sad. He was depressed. He had manic episodes. He had hallucinations. So the reaction that Vincent had to these faulty thinkings and irrational beliefs were intense. They so much so that he was institutionalized and possibly committed suicide. So if we take those things and we run them through the restructuring, the detect, debate, and discriminate, we look at Vincent's shoulds and musts. Vincent obviously feels as if he should be worthy, as if he should win approval, as if he should be liked. So let's take that and debate it. Is it Vincent's fault that he was not accepted, that he was not liked for all his trying? Was he a failure? Well, we could say yes, he was a failure, or we could look at it, debate it, and say, well, maybe not, because maybe his parents were unable to love due to the fact that they were so hurt. Maybe the women that Vincent tried to create relationships to were scarred and hurt, and they were unable to love and accept him. And we can kind of switch it and say, maybe Vincent, it's not your fault. Maybe these people had things that were wrong with them, that they were unable to give you what you needed and what you sought after so hard. And in doing that, we can say, okay, which one is the rational belief here? Vincent was a good man. He didn't harm people. He got angry. He got upset. Yes, of course, he had intensity, but he cared deeply. He wanted to preach. He wanted to help people. So is Vincent a failure? Is it impossible for him to win people's approval? Probably not. Probably these people just were in bad places in their lives and could not give him that. So that is kind of what the cognitive restructuring looks like. You run it through the detect, debate, discriminate, like we just did with Vincent, and you say, where is my faulty thinking? Where is my irrational behavior? And then once you detect the irrational thinking and you restructure it, you can start then going on and living and thinking in different ways. And cognitive therapists will often send you home with homework in doing this so that you can get practice, because after all, the main premise is that if you change your thought life, if you change your cognitions, you will change your life and how you live. Thank you.